Saturday morning at 11.
AM 560, The Answer.
Welcome back, Chicago. You're listening to the show all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship. Welcome back to Get Down to Business. I'm your host, Shalom Klein. We love to profile amazing people that are making an incredible impact. And my next guest is not only that, but also a very, very dear friend. I'm thrilled and honored to be joined by the Consul General of the State of Israel to the Midwest, my good friend, Aviv Ezra. Aviv, thank you so much for joining us on the air.
Shalom, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's a privilege and honor. And let me just begin by wishing you a happy birthday. I'm sure your listeners would be happy to join me a couple of days ago and wishing you a happy birthday.
I appreciate it, my friend. I appreciate it so, so much. And, you know, I was really looking forward to this conversation because I talk on the air so much about COVID and coronavirus, which is very, what I just described to you off the air is very short term. Bottom line, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this, and I wanted to talk to you more about the big picture. And the term that's often used for the state of Israel and the opportunities is Startup Nation. That's the moniker that's used to describe Israel's remarkable economic advances through technological innovation. And Aviv, you have been responsible for introducing Illinois companies and across the Midwest to Israel, and Israel to the Midwest. Aviv, what are some of the things that you are most proud of and some of the connections that you've been responsible for developing?
Well, Shalom, as you said, as in my capacity as the Israeli Consul General to the Midwestern United States, our focus is actually to connect the dots between 9 states and the state of Israel. Now, that falls in 3 major legs. One is what we call the community connectivity. The second is the political connectivity, and the third is the business or the economic connectivity. The last 2 legs are intertwined. That's politics and business. Why is it intertwined? And this is what we actually are doing in major reach outs to the states here, is that when you meet governors, members of Congress, U.S. senators, state legislators, mayors, etc., what they're really interested is, after a great support to the Israeli-U.S. bond that we have, is a focus on how can we work together business-wise? How can we bring Israeli companies and investments here? And vice versa, how can we bring U.S. companies from the Midwest and investments back to Israel? So I had the opportunity of bringing to Israel in the last 3.5 years about 6 governors, each one of them with a specific different theme, which is a business-oriented theme. So if I brought the governor of Michigan, he was focused on cyber technology. When I brought the governor of Illinois, it was more a combination of innovation. When I brought the governor of Iowa, it was AgTech. Governor of Wisconsin, WaTech. Each one of these niches that Israel has an added value in is an interest that is steered among the politicians over here, the decision makers over here. And when they come to Israel, they bring with them a delegation of usually 30, 40 business people. Like the governor of Michigan, as I mentioned, brought the CIO of the states and 40 CIOs of other companies like Ford and GM. And later on, after they came back overwhelmed by what they saw, I guess the level of entrepreneurship and the level of innovation, many of them open R&D centers in Israel for those companies. Ford and GM just did 2 examples. Ford just did that a couple of months ago.
And Aviv, I also want to talk about the academic partnerships, because that's something that almost every university around, I mean, our listeners are primarily in the Chicagoland area, and pretty much every university has an academic memorandum of understanding with an institution in Israel, and that results in some of the innovation that is taking place. Aviv, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Look, the best example is, for example, the trip that the governor of Illinois had to Israel. He brought with him a delegation which is a combination of innovation and technology, but also academia. So he brought with him President Klein, the president of the University of Illinois, and he brought with him a couple of his deans and provosts, and they came to Israel. They met with some of the major Israeli universities, Hebrew University, Tel Aviv University, Technion, etc. And when they came back over here, they decided that as part of the innovation center that they're building right now here in the South Loop, they will pick Israel as their first international component for that innovation center. So that innovation center that, by the way, the state of Illinois has appropriated about $500 million will, of course, have to have we'll have international connectivity. And President Klein from University of Illinois has decided to pick Israel as the first international, maybe one of the first two international component. An MOU was signed between University of Illinois and two of the other universities that I mentioned in Israel. And the idea is to have exchange of faculty, students, but also companies and entrepreneurs from both Israel and Chicago in this sense.
That's amazing. And although I said when we started this conversation, I didn't want to talk about COVID and coronavirus, the reality is that many of us are stuck in our homes and things like that. So I want to paint a rosier picture. And the best rosier picture that I could paint is what's going on in Israel. Israel is a pretty diverse country, a pretty diverse, as we say, startup nation. Aviv, can you tell our listeners, many of whom have traveled to Israel, your favorite spot in Israel and your favorite food in Israel?
Well, first of all, before I get to that specific food and the specific spot, I would say that one of the challenges that I've found in connecting both the Midwest and Israel is the fact that in the last almost 2 decades, we did not have, and this is just mind-boggling, a nonstop flight connecting Chicago and Israel. And you
trust me, I was teeing this up. I was getting ready for the big announcement, but go ahead, please.
All right. Well, you asked me the first question. What was my kind of a most proud moment and the kind of a legacy moment, right? Every administration ending up with a kind of a legacy. I have another year here, and my claim to fame, I wanted it to be in reinstalling a nonstop flight from Chicago to Israel, because what I hear from business people back in Israel is, look, if it's going to be shorter for me to make it from Israel to the Silicon Valley than from Israel to Chicago, I'll just fly to the Silicon Valley and I'll make my business over there. And what we managed to do is we managed to finally create a situation where we have El Al decided to fly a nonstop flight from Israel to O'Hare. The inauguration flight was supposed to be March 22nd, but unfortunately for all of us, COVID-19 decided to visit globally here, and this changed dramatically all the plans, both for El Al and others, and that line, unfortunately, had to be postponed. At this point, I'm very happy to announce on this show that we are looking forward to a possibility for a different carrier. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of it. It's called United. That will fly, hopefully, nonstop from O'Hare to Israel, COVID permitting, in September. If I understand correctly, 3 times a week. And this will definitely be a game changer. And we're extremely, extremely excited about it, looking forward to it, because it's going to be a game changer.
That's amazing. But you're not getting off the hook. What is your favorite food and favorite spot in Israel?
Thank you. So, look, I know that my wife is going to be listening to this. But I told her that what happens here stays here. So my favorite food is no doubt about it. It's the falafel. I mean, the best falafel you can get is in Machne Yehuda, in the market over there in the Jerusalem. And I look forward to hosting each one of your listeners to come and check it out and see if I'm on the right spot or not.
Absolutely. Aviv, that's probably one of my favorite memories too, is street food. We all love street food, but there's no other place than in Israel, where either in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem, where you can walk up and down the streets and see people from all different cultures and all different walks of life. When we started this conversation, I started talking about Startup Nation, and there's so much innovation that is taking place, by the way, many of which is in response and helping to find the treatment cure for COVID. But I'm curious, Aviv, can you talk about any of the innovation stories very briefly in our 1 minute remaining that our listeners might not be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Israel is focused in the recent decades in high-tech, biotech, telecommunications, IT, cyber, artificial intelligence, startup nation in the sense that we have the highest startup per capita in the world. You know, just recently when it comes to COVID, you could say that over 300 companies either developed new or readjusted existing technologies just to combat COVID-19 and the effects of it. I would say in the first quarter of 2020, over $3.6 billion of investment in digital health technologies, just in digital health, in 142 deals. That's a 79% increase from the same period of time last year. We have examples of companies like 30-minute COVID-19 test that is developed by AID Genomics. It's an FDA-approved company. Magen app, which is a contact tracing app, and many more. I don't want to take more of the time, but I really look forward to talking more about it.
Absolutely. I've been chatting with Aviv Ezra, the Consul General from the state of Israel to the Midwest, talking about Startup Nation, favorite foods, and that direct flights united between Chicago and Tel Aviv. Aviv, where can people learn more about the consulate and all about the important work that you're doing in the Midwest?
Thank you. Please look us up on our social media platforms. I have Facebook under Aviv Ezra, LinkedIn under Aviv Ezra. The consulate has a page of its own. Please look us up, a Twitter account, of course. Just search it, and we'll be more than happy to have that.
Thank you, Aviv Ezra, Consul General from the state of Israel to the Midwest, for joining us on Get Down to Business. We'll be right back.